Hello everybody, so Nyan here with another Age of Empires 4 interview. This is of course part of a series of interviews that I'm doing before the game releases and before the first major tournament, Genesis, talking with various Age of Empires people and other RTS players that are very likely to put a lot of time into playing at that event. So for today, I have an Age of Mythology player, you probably know them already, but I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and go on from there. So here we go.
Hi everyone, Nyan here. Before playing AoE 4, myself is an Age of Mythology player. I played this game for probably over 10 years. Well, I stopped it in the middle, so the overall time probably 5 or 6 years that I stay competitive. I do pretty decent in 1v1, but especially known for team games players, one of the best probably. Well, I won a couple teams game tournaments, so I think I'm pretty good at it. Well, besides Age of Mythology, I played a little bit Age of Empire 1 and 2 when I was a kid. Well, I was a pretty old guy, to be honest. Probably older than most professionals playing right now. But I didn't really try hard in AoE 1 or 2. I just probably played some campaign or accept some random things. I think Age of Mythology is the first RTS game, and actually the only RTS game that I actually try hard in it. So I really enjoyed it. That's why I pay a really long time for it. But at the same time, well, since when you're playing one of the game for so long, you start to feel burnout. Especially for RTS, there aren't a lot of good games coming out, to be honest, in the recent years. So I really enjoyed playing AoE 4 because for myself, I like trying a lot of different build orders, trying different off-meta stuff. People who know me for Age of Mythology will know about that. I do a lot of stuff that people may not expect and do something that certainly is not in the meta. So AoE 4 have a lot of things to explore. Besides Age of Mythology, I think one of the games I play really competitive is totally different. So if FPS, I played Overwatch and I was top 500 players for a while. That's pretty decent.
And I wanted to ask to get a perspective. I know quite a few Age of Empires 2 players. I've been talking with StarCraft 2 players, but I have yet to hear about how will your skill in Age of Mythology will translate to something like Age of Empires 4. Do you feel like there is something that you can move from one game to the other that would give you an advantage over somebody who is kind of jumping into Age of Empires 4 as their first RTS game? Or do you have to really start fresh? Do you feel like some confidence there for having been an Age of Mythology player, or just starting fresh right now?
Yeah, sure. This part I actually talked with some of the competitive Age of Mythology players. I think one thing we agree with the early game, the games played at the start is pretty similar to Age of Mythology. We have H2 time around 4 to 5 minutes. That's something extremely similar to Age of Mythology. And we start with making unit at the start or making second teams at the start. That's extremely close to Age of Mythology too. But as the game go on, I think Age of Mythology as a game compared to AoE 2, unit is not actually hard countered. You can actually only make one type of units and it actually works, but not something happen in AoE 2 and especially in AoE 4. And the late game, Age of Mythology about much smaller population limit. So as the game go on, I think the game is much closer to AoE 2. Probably AoE 2 probably have a better late game, how the game should be played. But I think one thing they need to adjust is the early game. I mean, AoE 2 compares to Age of Mythology or AoE 4, I think the game pace at the start is quite slow. And even people play at 1.7 instead, I think it's 107% speed, right? But the game's still a bit slower, so I think that's one thing they need to adjust. So another thing I heard of is that AoE 4 is much similar to Age of Empires Online, a game that some of the top later players actually play that game, probably explain why they are doing so good. Well, I mean, RTS game will have a pretty high learning curve. I played this AoE 4 probably already over 60 hours, probably a lot. Then it's still a lot of things for me to learn, especially when the game is released, so that will be changed. Well, I think people play other RTS games will have a head start, but well, once people learn how to do the build orders, new players can check the records, what player plays. I think then they could improve really quickly.
So I want to know, since you touched on the Age of Empires 2 players, do you feel like the other Age of Empires games, Online, 3, Mythology, they might get underrated simply because Age of Empires 2 is the sort of bigger scene within that franchise? Or do you think that there is merit in saying Age of Empires 2 players are generally across the board sort of a skill up from all of the other people? Or do you think there is some underrating going on with the other people in the franchise?
Well, I think so. I think actually top players should have really similar skill level. I mean, if we look at stress test result of the top players are actually across StarCraft, Age of Mythology, so Age of Empires 3, all the different games. Seems like that for top players, when they pick a new game, they have pretty similar skill level. Of course, with the largest player base of AoE 2 and how competitive they are, I think they spend a lot of time on that game. That's why people feel they are much higher skill. I mean, for players play others RTS game, the game is way not that competitive. People are not spending that much of effort into the games, to be honest, and especially when you can't make a living on it, people just play it for fun. So, but in terms of skill, I think top players are very similar. I think it really depends on how many times, how many effort people are going to spend on Age of Empires 4 at the start.
Cool. And speaking of those closed betas and the closed and the open stress test, right? You were among, I believe if I recall correctly, you were among one of the top 25 players in the closed beta, and of course you played the open stress test. You also played in the Storrn Stress Cup, which we're going to talk in a moment. But I want to know, just getting that quick snapshot of you playing in the closed beta and in the open stress test might not say everything about how much time you invested in each of those occasions. So could you tell us exactly how much time you put into it? Like, did you play the closed beta a lot? Like, for example, someone like Lucifron played it to about 150 games, so that is a ton of games. You obviously played fewer than that, but did you engage with that with the game in the closed and open beta a lot, or was it more of a case of, well, it's a new Age of Empires game, I'm an insider, might as well play it? What was the relationship in there?
I think I have around 100 games, but I think, or even a bit more than that, to be honest. I played it a few days after just that they said it's closed, but because I believe those games were pretty bad. Well, but yeah, I already spent probably 60 or more hours on this game already, and that's what I think that I'm still learning about this game. I think one thing about playing the games a lot right now is because the games still don't have record of games, and not a lot of people making good education materials so far. So for us, the starting players, yeah, we spend a lot of time on it, but actually our learning is kind of slow because we can't check records or we can't check other player gameplays. I think for new players, they may kind of worry about, some of players already spend so much time on that. This may be very hard for us to catch up. But to be honest, when the game is actually official released, with game records or mods, people going to set up the stream and tournaments coming, people can learn really quick from that one. I mean, well, we did a lot of hard stuff already, and people can learn from our mistake.
Yeah, and well, I was gonna say talking about mistakes, but I don't think it was necessarily a mistake because the meta was evolving every second. But in the Storrn Stress Cup, you played Abbasid all the way through, and yeah. I'm really interested to hear if you think like your thoughts change about the civilization, or like not necessarily in the entire civilization, but the build order that you were going for, the sort of concepts that you had behind those matches? Because when it came time for you to face Striker in HIV, who went Mass Cavalry, you had a little bit of trouble there. And I'm wondering if that tournament, those 2 games that you had against Striker, were you able to eke out some sort of knowledge from them? And if so, what were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, actually before playing the stress test, I have never played XLE. So it's pretty fresh for me. And then after tournaments and checking some of the replays, I found that XLE seems to be a stronger sweep if you're playing 1TC. So I tried it a bit more XLE on my own. Because of that eco bonus, you can up triggers, have more unit as a start. That's what I would play differently. If I go 1TC, I probably play XLE. But on the other hand, for my experience, and I play against different people, for going 2TC start, which is probably getting more popular, I would say seem to be a stronger safe. But it's hard to tell. I mean, XLE overall is pretty crazy eco bonus. I would be surprised if they don't change it on release. So yeah, that's what my thought.
So do you think we're gonna see that sort of rapid meta developments in that first week before Genesis? And if so, how are you preparing yourself to kind of keep up with it and not get caught out by, it might not even be a fault of your own that you end up in, the meta that was yesterday, the day of the qualifiers. So how do you prepare to avoid a situation like that?
I think probably going to check. I mean, the observations function is pretty convenient on AoE 4. You can keep watching other top players play, especially if they have early ladder release. You probably know who are the best player, to be honest. I think on my mind, come know who will be some of those of the best players. So I think checking different players' record will be something really good for my own. I mean, when I start with playing Age of Mythology and playing competitive, I spend more time checking records and watching other people play rather than playing my own games. So I think that's how you learn. And one thing will be interesting is happening in other competitive games. Once the tournament is coming, people will stop playing ladders. They will try to hide their strategy and only play with their friends. I don't know if this happened in AoE 4. If this happened in the tournament, it will be very funny. People going to hide this stuff for the final stage for the tournaments, and anything is different in the final stage than the early stage.
Nice. And speaking about groups and having secret screams and stuff like that, I've actually been talking with the guys from StarCraft 2. Turns out everybody's from Australia there, and they are all kind of coming in as a group, and they're going to be practicing together and doing those things together. And I want to know, do you have a group of players that you're gonna be in communications with like soon after the release of the game, whether that is to practice for Genesis or just in general to be able to like figure out what is happening in the higher levels of the game, to have a strategy when it comes to the ladder, when it comes to your matches?
Oh yeah, we have a Discord group for a few players. So yeah, we will see. The games haven't released it yet, so it's really hard to tell what's going to happen, but we'll see. I mean, it's good to have some players to train with you. I mean, playing alone is pretty hard. I mean, especially one thing about happening at the start of games, because for good players, I think it's pretty easy for us to win first 10 games pretty easy when the game is released. So you probably just win because you know how to play RTS better. You may just playing something is completely wrong style and you still win the game. So if you only play ladders, it's probably hard to you to improve a lot, especially at the start. I mean, when people elo is still haven't spread out yet.
So the people that you're in that group with, are they like Age of Empires franchise players, or is it a case of being Age of Mythology players only? What is, what's the markup on these people? You don't necessarily have to give names, but I'm curious to see the division.
I won't name everyone, but most of us is from Age of Mythology.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most of us are from Age of Mythology. A couple of us are pretty high up on the ladders, so that's what I can say.
Nice. And are you guys gonna look out to do something like practice matches? Like, the question is, how much prioritization are you gonna have between playing the ladder, because obviously there is seating positions there to be gained, there are 20 seats there, that by getting that top 20 in the ladder, you could get a really good seating for the qualifiers. Then there is the conversation about playing those ladder matches and just getting your games in, grinding and finding out how the basic mechanics works and getting a good feeling for that. Then there is the analyzing of those matches that you were talking about with the recorded games and seeing what other top players are doing. And finally, there are these private lobbies where you're trying to practice one thing in particular with one of your, I don't know if I would call it teammates, but at least somebody that you're very familiar with, a friend of the game, right? How are you prioritizing these 4 areas? Which one do you think will be the most valuable in this early period? That sort of thing.
Oh, I think at first probably everyone just going to focus on later game first, since no one knows what exactly to do. So I think people will start playing later game first and see how far they can get, and start watching the games they lost and trying all the different things. So we can expect at the start people going to try different things. We can see probably people playing it in the just test will be high and the leader at the first, just because things work in the just test should be similar on release. Even I think there will be some changes, and I hope so. I mean, but then I think once people notice what kind of strategy is stronger, for example, we see just test seem like going double stable or 2DC are the best thing to do. That's what people should try first. And I think the map pool will be very different, because we don't know what will be the later map pool. But in the tournaments, I think we already said that the first map will be our rival. So that's one thing. I mean, if they have like 10 maps, but in tournaments you only play one, then playing later may not really help you a lot. Especially, I don't know. I mean, a lot of water maps seems a bit weird for me that I don't really enjoy playing. I don't know whether they're in letters or not.
Right. And going into Genesis proper now, I want to know, what position would you be happy getting in the tournament? I've talked with other players, even StarCraft 2 players have told me, hey, if I get top 64, even if I don't qualify, if I get top 64, I'm happy. I think I made a good result. Other ones told me, a top 16, getting into the money, that would be fun. I want to know your perspective. Where would you say that you would be happy with for your first performance in a major tournament in a new RTS game?
Well, the first thing I would be not to lose the early stages. I mean, it's pretty easy because it's best of 1. Everything could happen. Because especially in AoE 4, there's no score table, so you actually don't know how far you're leading or losing or not. So it's pretty easy for you to make a mistake just because you underestimate how much you are leading, and then you lose a game. It's happened for me before when I playing letters in Just Dance. So I think that's one thing to be careful. To be careful at the start first, not to get locked out just because myself make a silver mistake and lock myself out at the start. Well, in the end, I mean, getting top 32 or 60 will be very decent for me. And since how competitive and how new the game is, I won't say I will say hope to finish. Well, I want to win the game. I mean, everyone want to win, but it's pretty not realistic to say that, I will get into top 4 or top 8, because you don't know what will happen. But my goal is probably not to lose in the best of 1 round first.
Right. And in that case, I also want to hear, which player do you think has a good shot, not necessarily guaranteed shot at winning the tournament, but at least a believable chance in your eyes to get really far? And if you can't think of like a particular person, just like a category of people, like, do you think the StarCraft pros are going to be the ones that are going to be dominating that top of the bracket, or do you think the Age of Mythology, Age of Empires Online people are going to be the ones to kind of push it over the edge and be able to claim that first tournament win?
Well, for me, in my mind, I think, my highest up is Mister. I don't know if you know who is Mister. One of the best Age of Mythologies and Age of Empires online players. He's one of the best RTS player I know. Because he's not playing Age of AoE 2, people may not know his name, but I think I have a pretty high hope for him, especially if he put a lot of effort at AoE 4.
Nice, yeah, I've heard of this. I've been trying to get him for an interview as well, so I gotta check again if he's available.
I heard him got an interview for the Great National TV.
So yeah, looking past Genesis, we're gonna get into the middle of November, December. We don't know yet if there's gonna be another major tournament announced for something like January. But do you think that even with or without a major going after Genesis, do you see yourself putting a lot of time into Age of Empires 4 competitively? Like, is it gonna be something that replaces your Age of Mythology time? Is it going to be something that you do alongside your Age of Mythology gameplay? What's going to be your commitment to Age of Empires 4 going forward?
I think probably until the end of years, AoE 4 will be the games I played the most, just because it seems pretty fun to play, and I enjoy trying new builds orders, trying new stuff. So even there's no major tournament, I will probably play more AoE 4 than Age of Mythology, just because Age of Mythology is a game I repeated so long and I got a bit burned out about it. So yeah, I think I'll focus on AoE 4.
Nice. And now, final question. Do you stream? Are you going to be streaming Age of Empires 4? Do you have any sort of socials that you want to shout out that, people that might want to hear more from you or might want to see some of your gameplay? Where can they go and check you out?
Yeah, I think so. I just got a new PC. My old one, I can't even do streaming on Stress Test, so I think maybe I will stream some, especially at the start of the letters when everyone is trying to exploring and trying new stuff. I will go to make some stream or put up some videos on. You guys will see.
And if you want to stay tuned to whatever Nyan puts out, make sure to check the description. There's going to be links there to all of his socials that he has available at the moment. Of course, if you want to find out more information about Genesis, the major tournament that everybody's kind of talking about for Age of Empires 4, also the description is going to have everything you need. If you want to see more content like this one, feel free to subscribe. I'm going to be putting it out as much as I physically can, really. And of course, leave a like, leave a comment if you really want to help me, if you really want to support me on this little interview. So thank you so much for watching till the end, and have a fantastic day.